You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 63. In this episode, I'm going to be interviewing Philip Donlay, who has been a flight instructor, flown a private jet for a Saudi prince, and for 28 years flew a corporate jet for a Fortune 500 company. Philip is licensed to fly 6 different jets and has logged nearly 14,000 hours of flight time, and his travels have taken him to over 40 countries on 5 continents. And although he's no longer flying, he now divides his time between Montana and the Pacific Northwest. But Philip has been able to combine his passion for flying and writing into writing these best-selling novels featuring pilot Donovan Nash. The 8th one in that series, Speed the Dawn, is being published today, Tuesday, March 6, 2018, which is when I am publishing this podcast. So you can go check it out on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, wherever you like to purchase your books and ebooks. You'll be able to check out Speed the Dawn. I received an advance copy, and it is a very good book, fast action. Highly recommend it. Go check it out. But without further ado, let's get right into the interview with Philip Donlay. We'll learn more about Speed the Dawn, his other books about flying, and a whole bunch of more stuff. So stay tuned for that interview coming up right now. Hey everybody, this is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author, and for this episode of the podcast, I am talking with Philip Donlay on Skype. How are you, Phil?
Alan, I'm good. How are you today?
I am doing well. I'm very excited to have you on. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast.
My pleasure. It's in fact you're the test subject here. This is the first interview that I've done for the new book, so I'm treading on unfamiliar territory in terms of Speed the Dawn.
Oh, all right. Well, that's kind of cool then, like the first one. Yeah, Speed the Dawn, that comes out on March 6th. We're recording this a little bit before March 6th, but by the time everyone is listening to this, the book is going to be out, so go grab it. Phil was nice enough to send me an advance copy, and I've been enjoying it so far. It's been a really good read, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But Phil, can you tell the listeners about yourself, your background, and...
Well, I was raised in Kansas, and I got bit by the airplane bug really early on in my life. My grandfather had a private pilot's license, and he took me up. As best we can piece it together, I was about 4 years old. Scared me to death, and I couldn't wait to do it again. So that kind of started a lifelong love affair with airplanes, and I got my pilot's license when I was in high school. By the time I was 19, I was a flight instructor, and by the time I was 20, I was flying a jet for a Saudi sheikh living in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So it was a fast climb, and I did it for 33 years professionally. Not over there. I was lucky enough to come back. In that, I was always a reader, and so I finally made a promise to myself that I'd try to write a book, and it's way harder than it looks, first of all, just from a reader's standpoint. And I finally got there. And so I don't fly anymore. I write full time. And this book is number 8 in the Donovan Nash series. And I'm very pleased with this one, and I'm excited about its prospects.
So how would you describe your books, the Donovan Nash series, to someone who might not be familiar with your work?
Well, they're action, thriller, suspense, espionage with a little romance thrown in, and they have a kind of a scientific or a natural disaster sort of element to them. I've always liked that. As a pilot, I've dealt with weather every day, and I've pretty much been to every place that I write about in my books. There's a book, Aftershock, which is coming out in paperback, and we will be out in paperback by the time this airs. It takes place in Guatemala, and I was inspired when I flew to Guatemala and I saw all the volcanoes. So I think I get compared to Michael Crichton a little bit, and Clive Cussler a little bit. So they're nice crossover books. I have strong female characters, and that really has appealed to a wider audience than some thrillers. And I had a son in junior high when I first started writing, and I decided that I wanted him to be able to read them. So I made the conscious decision to have there's no swearing in his books, any of them. So and people have remarked on that too, that they enjoy that. That you don't need to. You don't need to drop a lot of F-bombs to make your point. And in fact, you won't ever find one of those in my books.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's been something that's been very popular. I have a couple of interviews, authors that I've interviewed that have been doing that, and they always get a lot of great feedback about that, about the, as you said, not a lot of F-bombs or any at all. So it's an interesting trend that I've been noticing lately here.
Well, that's not to say that there's not a lot in the process of writing books. Now,
Yeah.
I will say that, but none of them make it into the book.
Yes, yeah, along with the forehead slamming into your desk.
There's a whole list of neurotic behavior that authors seem to acquire while they're writing.
Speed the Dawn, that's the latest book. The plot on that one.
The premise on Speed the Dawn is that I wanted to tie some things together. And you write a series, you're always creating loose ends, and then you tie them back up. And there was a character, and I'm trying not to make any spoilers here, but there was a character, a much beloved character. He was kind of left hanging. So this book was kind of aimed at him. He was popular. He's not with the EcoWatch people anymore. EcoWatch is the fictional nonprofit organization that seeks to find better answers to the problems that we have with the natural disasters and the environment. And so I found the place. I knew I wanted a fire, and by the time a thriller writer gets done with the concept of a match, it's a blowtorch, because that's what we do. So this book brings all the characters together in Monterey, California, and they're going to christen this ocean-going research ship, and it's going to be a big party. Everybody's happy, and then we have a meteor. There's a meteor strike. So that creates lots of chaos, but what it does mainly is it creates forest fires. And it creates forest fires and urban fires. And that's just the worst of both worlds. So the entire book takes place in the 12 hours that it takes for the initial meteor strike, I guess you'd call it, and a resolution that looks like it might work, because the fire is not only threatening Monterey and Monterey County, it is threatening the entire Bay Area. So there's lots at stake, and there's lots going on. The reviews so far have been unanimously positive. In a book that takes place in 12 hours, there's a lot of stuff in there. So it's a fast-moving read. My advice to readers is don't think you're just going to read a chapter or two before you go to bed, because that's one of my biggest complaints. People write me and say, you owe me a night's sleep. So it is a fast-moving, fast-paced book, and there's a lot of stuff, and there's some cool stuff, and it's all based on science. I did a lot of research with this book because I don't know a lot about it, but I do now. And I got to hang out at the National Forest Service Fire Lab in Missoula, Montana. Talked with one of the scientists there, and we played with fire in the fire lab, and that was worth the price of admission right there. So there's a lot of stuff in this book. It's a lot of moving parts, but I think in the end it's a very satisfying, fast read.
Yeah, that's I've been reading it, and you're absolutely right. Even now, I'm kind of like looking like, because I kind of left. I'm on the 5th chapter. I was like, I wonder what happened now. But yeah, you start right off the gate with great action and a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, I think people who like the fast-paced, action-packed type novels are going to enjoy it. They're going to be in for a ride.
Well, that's what they talk about. Thriller writers, we start and blow something up,
yeah.
And then. And now that we got your attention, now we'll start the story.
Now, something that we chatted a little bit before I hit recording. I live in San Francisco, the Bay Area, so it's always fun to see. The Bay Area seems to get destroyed a lot in movies and books, but there's been a lot of fires in Northern California, actually the entire state of California. So I was kind of thinking about that as I was reading, because you must have been seeing that in the news as you were writing this. Did that affect you at all, or did it make you ponder anything, or how did that affect anything at all?
Well, the latest round of fires, the book was already written. So, and it's my experience with fires was in Montana, where I spend summers a lot of times, and I have been close enough to see the flames and to pull over so the first responders can get to the fire, and it's a it's a fearsome thing. It's they almost feel like that they're alive when they're big, and they're just chewing along, and they're fairly relentless, and so that kind of spawned the idea of trying to write a thriller based on a fire. The fire in Speed the Dawn is almost a character, and it's almost and it is the main adversary in the book. So as I watched this summer with California and the fires, and I had a deeper understanding of what they were doing and trying to do. I had a lot of sympathy for the people that were there and affected, and being evacuated is just something we're not accustomed to. I grew up in Kansas, and we'd have tornadoes, and we'd have to flee to somebody's cellar or something in the middle of the night, and it was over. It was over in 20 minutes. But the fires would just march on, and I think that would be very difficult. And I have a new sympathy for the people that are going to deal with that, because I think it's an ongoing problem.
So when you decided that you said you wanted to try to write a book, did you focus on thrillers and mysteries? Is that what you enjoyed to read?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You're right. What you want to read, and those are the books that I love. And so, on my website, there's a list of authors that have inspired me, and most of them were, it was early on. I sort of got imprinted on thrillers, and like a lot of writers, I started with the Hardy Boys, and that was thrilling when, I'm 10 years old and I'm reading those books, and it's just like, oh, this is so awesome. And then Clive Cussler was an influence. I was reading his books when I was in high school, and Wilbur Smith. So yeah, and then there's some airplane stuff that influenced me as well. So I do get to combine my knowledge of aviation. I do weave that in and out of the story to various degrees. Not only do I bring the reader inside the airplane, I bring him in the cockpit. And so I think that's an aspect that adds a little more oomph to the story, because that, for most people, is a mystery. So yeah, I think first and foremost, I would always write thrillers or suspense books. They're fun to read. They're fun to write.
Yeah, the aviation aspect to it is a lot of fun. It's not something can't think of any other. I mean, there's a classic, was it Arthur Haley, I think, Airport or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the only one that can even comes to mind. So it's kind of a cool subgenre of thrillers to do it, have it aviation based, and also the natural disasters too that permeates in your books too. So it's a kind of a cool mix. So that's just sort of grabbing your interest and then your love of thrillers and kind of like mixing it all together, huh?
Well, that's the recipe that I eventually landed on. My very first book was Category 5, and it dealt with a hurricane. And I had weathered an actual hurricane on the East Coast, and that was a different experience. And that started it. And then my second book was Code Black, and Code Black is the highest level of snow emergency at Chicago O'Hare Airport. So that's kind of my tip of the hat to all of the aviation writers that have written before me that inspired me. So that's almost all aviation. And then I kind of branched out. And with the natural disaster, we've had I mentioned the volcano book. We've had environmental disasters. There have been terrorist-inspired disasters. Donovan Nash, who's my lead character, and his band of people at EcoWatch have saved the world several times over. So it's been a fun and continues to be a fun ride for me, at least.
And is each book in the series, even though it's part of a series, are they standalones? Like you don't have to read them in order? Because I started reading the Speed of the Dawn, and I didn't have any problem, even though I hadn't read the other books.
Now, my publisher and I, we work to try to keep you have to keep the continuity, of course, because it is a series. But each book has to be a standalone. You have to, so readers like yourself or anybody that might be listening, jump into the pool anywhere. I mean, it's just, you're not going to be left in the dark. You may go back to the first one and start there, but it's you won't be lost, and the books are self-contained. So it's, there's not giant cliffhangers that leave you for a year while I'm trying to figure out what happens next. You can jump in anywhere, and I encourage you to do so.
Yeah, I just got the image of George R.R. Martin. People have been waiting like 10 years for his book now.
I know, so yeah, I wouldn't do that to you, but they are, there is there is an underlying progression in the characters, and if people seem to enjoy that have started and read them all, and so I try to add a little bit of that to each book. So there's the welcome aboard book for the people that maybe haven't read them before, and then there's the underlying kind of story that weaves in and out that the people that have been reading it will appreciate.
When you start preparing to write a book, it seems like you did a lot of research. You said for Speed of the Dawn, you met with the fire expert in the Forestry Service. So how much research and preparation do you put in before you even start writing? And do you do do you outline the entire novel before you sit down to write?
I do a lot of research because I do writing about science and nature. There are some knowns that I have to deal with, and there are boundaries, and so I have to understand the limits of where I can and can't go. And then they're complicated enough, and like I said, this book takes place in 12 hours. So I have to do a proof of concept. I don't actually call it an outline so much, but I have to make sure that everything that I want to do in the time frame actually works. And some of my books, last year's book, Seconds to Midnight, takes place on 2 different continents. So I have to sit down and I have to work out time zones and who's doing what when, and so it is complicated, at least in the planning stages. And if I do the planning stage right, then the rest of it's fairly easy. And but there is that proof of concept that says, okay, I want this fire to do this. Is that possible? And then I talked with people at CAL FIRE and learned a little bit of their mindset. And the Forest Service, of course, was wonderful. And I do a lot of research with just the geography. I actually went and stayed in Monterey for 2 months and did a lot of the research there, which is not entirely tough duty. So
beautiful area down there.
It's one of my favorite places. Yeah. So so there is a lot of research, and I get surprised as well because I start writing and then I never stay on course, and so I'll veer off on some other track and I'll have to stop and do more research. And that's just part of the program. But I do, and so when you read about fires in this book, I didn't make it up. Everything happens that can happen, and it can happen. I think the tagline I've heard before is it's not that it can't happen in terms of the storylines in my books. It just hasn't happened yet.
And is that something? Do you find like when you reach out to the professionals in these different areas, are they receptive, or is it like, a writer's calling me?
It depends. I think if you're prepared, if if you approach it like a professional and treat them like a professional, I think that helps a lot. And you always reach out, via email nowadays first, and so you can kind of tell, a little bit about their response. If they don't have time, I certainly understand. Sometimes it's difficult. In one of my books, I needed a really big man-made explosion. And that's difficult information to get nowadays, which is as it should be. So it was a very delicate process. And I was finally able to talk to a professor at a college that dealt with mining, and because they do all kinds of controlled explosions. And he was nice enough to help me out. But if he hadn't, I don't know. I'm always still able to just make stuff up. I do have that at my disposal as well. But I do like to make it as realistic as possible.
So do you find any similarities between yourself and your main characters in your books?
Well, other than he's way better looking, taller, more money. We both have about the same flying skills, I think, is about the only correlation. So, I think my characters are there's a little bit of me in all the characters. My son, who's he's 30 years old now, but he reads these, and from his vantage point, he hears me in all the characters. He knows how I talk. So I think that's kind of an assessment of the writing. They're all just amalgamations of people I've met and the quirks I want them to have, and so there's a little bit of me in there, but not much.
So when you start writing, when you're in the writing process of writing a project, do you have like a set schedule, and do you try to get X amount of words per day in? I'm just kind of curious how that works for you.
I'm not a big word count guy. What I practice is it works for me is the full immersion writing thing, and I'm lucky enough. In the past few years, I'd go on book tour in the spring because my books always come out in March, and then I do the bulk of the research, and I can start that while I'm on book tour, which is nice. And then I like to be parked somewhere quiet for at least 3 months, and I've been going to Montana and doing that. And so the routine is you get up in the morning and make some hot tea, and I sit down, and I pretty much know where I'm going to start. I leave off the day before knowing exactly what the next sentence is. So that kind of jump starts it, and I get going, and so I write, and I'll write I'd like to get a chapter done, really, or more. It's maybe 10, 12 pages, and then I quit. I break for the day, and I have lunch, do any chores I need to, and then one of the I have to get out of my head at some point. So I go and I try to do a little fly fishing. It's something I'm getting better at. I'm still a work in progress in that regard. But and by the time I get done doing that, I back to the cabin and it's happy hour. And so you just it's repeat as necessary until you have a rough draft. And I don't ever go back. I write page 1, June 1st, and I don't ever go back and read page 1 again until maybe October. I just get the rough draft done. I print it out along with all of my notes of stuff I need to change, want to change, should change, maybe change that I just have thought of along the way. And then it's like cheese. I just put it away and let it ferment. So, and then I start the rewrites, and I do that in as little time as possible, just so, because it's like spinning plates. I mean, you've got to keep all of these things going in your head, and you make one change on page 5, you have to then make sure and check everything that it alters for the rest of the manuscript. So they're concentrated bursts is how I write. the shortest I've ever done, I wrote Aftershock in the rough draft in 7 weeks. It usually takes longer than that, but someday maybe it'll take less than that.
And do you use Word, or what do you use to? Yeah.
Yeah, Word, and I do have to laugh at myself sometimes. When I first started tinkering with writing, computers really weren't around yet, so I had a little tiny word processor where I could see like 4 lines at a time, and I would just peck at it, and then it's not uncommon for me to be sitting here in front of my monitor and then looking at stuff on my tablet that I have saved, and then asking my phone questions. So the high tech thing is firmly got its grip on me. I'm not great at it, but I certainly do use it.
Yeah, I remember the old that little brother typewriter, the kind of word processing typewriter.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in the day. But that was distraction free though. You couldn't get on the internet or anything because it wasn't around for the regular people.
No, and I remember going to the library.
Yeah,
going through the card catalog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was now we're really aging ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it's been a remarkable step forward in technology, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it is nice. Yeah, sometimes I see people with like an old school typewriter, from like way back, and they're like typing on that. And I'm like, why? They're usually young, so I think they think it's cool or fun or whatever. But it's like, whoa.
Well, it's certainly retro, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is true.
I can remember in junior high, I think they made us take typing.
Yeah.
I was not very good, and I'm not good now. That part didn't catch very well. So I still do type. It's. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I type with 2 fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly fast, but I can't touch type, and I'm too old and cantankerous to learn at this point.
Yeah, see, so that's good for listeners out there who are aspiring writers, and you might not think you have the typing chops. See, you don't really, as long as you got the story down, and you'll get through that part.
Well, it's a matter of what ends up on the screen. However you do it, people can you can talk into it now. You can type, and I think and I don't use this, but my tablet has a stylus. I can actually write on the screen, and then it'll save it as a document. So there's a lot of different ways, and you figure out what works. And then writers are kind of a superstitious lot, so we don't change much. Once we get published, we don't change much. I think because there's just a hesitation to do that, and so I write the same at book 9 than I did at book 3. So it's the same process.
Yeah, it's kind of like Lee Child, who always starts at the same day. He starts a new Jack Reacher on the same exact day in September. I can't remember the date, but
I did not hear that because I'm a June 1st guy.
Oh wow, yeah. So yeah, that's a Lee Child thing. Yeah, he starts on the same exact date in September. He sits down and gets to work. So is that something now you're already gearing up in the next few months then for the next one? Are you continuing the Donovan Nash series?
I'm doing research. I'm in my proof of concept stage here, and so I'm not quite sure. There's several ways to go here. There could be I'm toying a little bit with maybe a spinoff of one of the characters, just to write something new. It would still be tremendously connected to the series, but I've come up with some interesting characters, and I think it'd be fun to maybe explore them a little bit, or put them in the forefront of the book, and kind of shift the points of view around a little bit. So I'm tinkering.
And do you still find time to read?
Reading, that's a hard question. Reading has become one of the casualties of being an author, And so I don't read as much, that frustrates me. I don't want to read while I'm writing. I don't ever do that. I turn into a magazine junkie. So that is, that's a kind of a sore point in my world. It's a little like flying. I love to fly. I used to go fly for fun, and then when I started doing it professionally, I didn't do it for fun anymore. So I don't know if that's a natural occurrence, but I don't read. There are a few authors I do read their books just because I love what they write so much, but I don't. I'm just I'm not reading 3 books a week like I once did.
And you mentioned earlier about the book tours. Is that something that you'll be doing this for Speed the Dawn as well?
Yeah, I'll leave Utah and I go to there's a conference, Left Coast Crime they call it, and it's for and by authors, and so it's in Reno this year, and I always try to go to that. It's typically in March or it's right around book release, so I go there, and that's great because you get to hang with other authors, and we're kind of a solitary bunch, and so to hang out and talk shop with other writers is amazing. And then from there, I go back to the Midwest and I hop around. My tour schedule will be up on my website here in the next few weeks, I hope. So yeah, it's a way to go and connect with your fans and the people that have been following you and read you, and you meet new people too. And the travel is a little frustrating at times, but when I get done with book tour, I always feel really good about it. I meet a lot of people. I hear nice things, and that's kind of payback for all the Friday nights that I sit in front of the computer and do research and stuff. So I do like it, and I like radio too. This is awesome because I can just talk normally, and I'm not in a room full of people, which is not my favorite thing. So it's nice to reach out and share things with people.
Yeah, and so and your website is philipdonlay.com, and I'll have links to that on the website. Yes.
Yep, that's it. So there's it's all up to date except for the tour schedule. I said that'll be up shortly. Mm-hmm. And then all the books are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and just all the usual outlets and Goodreads.
And I see
Goodreads.
Oh yeah,
interesting because it's there's a lot of reviews there that aren't that they're not the industrial reviews that like Publishers Weekly and stuff. It's a little more grassroots, I think. So you can get a sense of what these books are about by Amazon reviews and Goodreads reviews.
Yeah, I was just checking out your website too, and I just noticed Seconds to Midnight was best of 2017 from Suspense Magazine. So that's pretty cool.
That was very cool. I didn't know that was happening until my publisher called me and said, you might want to pick up the December issue, and they did. It was that's very rewarding for me. So if you're good, if Suspense Magazine says it's one of the best of 2017, who are we to argue with them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you've had some pretty amazing write-ups though. I've seen you got from the late Vince Flynn was one of my favorites. So that must be pretty cool when someone like that is praising your work.
Well, Vince I was living in Minnesota. That's where I was there. In fact, my first 2 books were published while I was still flying.
Oh, okay.
And so I was in Minneapolis, and I just can't say enough about the writers community, the artist community in Minneapolis. They're just extraordinary people. And I was talking with a guy I worked with, and I told him I'd written this book, and he said, he says, I got a buddy that's a writer. He says, I'm going to have him call you, and so I'm like, sure. And so he says, his name's Vince Flynn. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And the next day, Vince Flynn called. and we met and had coffee for an hour, and that was one of the most extraordinary hours I've ever spent in terms of my literary career. And he told me how it was, and he's, bless his heart, he was not wrong about anything. And he was, and then he read the book, which he didn't have to, and gave me the blurb, and was kind of a mentor. And I was really, I still miss him. I mean, he died way too young. But that was extraordinary place at that time when I was there. John Sanford I met him, and William Kent Kruger is a buddy, and it's a great place. And that's in fact, Minneapolis is where I go for a book tour for the most part, because those people are still astounding, and there's a lot of, I think Minneapolis is one of the most literate states in the country, and there's a lot of readers there, and
they love mysteries and the thrillers and suspense. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned William Kent Kruger, because I was just in St. Paul with visiting my wife's family for Christmas, and my father-in-law mentioned William Kent Kruger. I wasn't familiar with him, and I just read my first book of his just like 2 months ago. It was awesome, but what a small world.
Yeah, he is awesome. He is one of the class acts that I've run into in this business. To listen to him talk to an audience is, if anybody wants to just be wowed, go listen to him talk, and then read his books. He's an extraordinary guy. Yeah. And so that was, again, one of the benefits of living in Minneapolis was, I sat down and had a beer with him and talked, and one of the things I get to do is as a former pilot, I'm the expert that some people call when they want to know airplane stuff. So I've helped I helped Kent with an aviation section in one of his books, and different people. That's always kind of fun, because their writers are so guarded about what their plots are and stuff, but they want help, and so it's always an interesting process that.
Yeah, it's cool to get like a little sneak peek before as the magic is happening.
Yes, yeah. Now those books I do read. The writers are kind enough. Typically, they'll send you an advance copy, and then you can kind of see what they did with your information, and it's pretty spot on. I have to say, they take you at your word, but it's fun. It's fun to do that.
Okay, Phil. Well, I'm going to be letting you go here. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but just want to remind the listeners, March 6th, 2018, Speed the Dawn comes out. So if you're going to be listening to this on March 6th, so go to Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or wherever you want to go, wherever you get your books, and go check out Speed the Dawn. I've been reading it, and it's been a fun read. It's action-packed, so I think listeners will enjoy that. Is there anything else you want to say to the listeners before I let you go?
Alan, I just want to say thanks, and I would like to tell the readers that on my website there's a contact page, and there's an email there, and I get those. I read all of those, and so any feedback, you want to say hi or ask me a question, feel free. It's what it's there for.
Okay, and that's philipdonlay.com, and so just go check it out. Check it out. All right, Phil, thanks so much, and it was nice talking to you.
Alan, anytime. Hopefully I'll talk to you next year.
All right, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author. I'd like to ask you to please review and rate this podcast over on iTunes. It really helps me get the word out. If you take a few seconds of your time to do that, it would be much appreciated. You can also visit my website at thrillingreads.com/podcast for show notes on this episode, as well as information about the podcast in general. And you can also sign up for my mailing list there. You'll be getting special offers from our guests, as well as information, behind the scenes information on the podcast. And please do visit my author website at alanpeterson.com. I appreciate your support. And so until next episode, I will talk to you then.